Well, good morning again, everybody. Welcome to the Team Excellence Call. This is Lynn Gardner. I'm calling in from beautiful Virginia. I have to say it's another overcast, kind of misty kind of day, and I'm working really hard to be sure that I find my joy in it. It seems like the things that we criticize in life are the things that we actually deal with one day. And I remember with my dad, he was older in his 80s, and if it was rainy or misty or cloudy, it just kind of not be in a bad mood, but just kind of be melancholy. And I'd say, Daddy, it's just rain, and here I am now struggling, trying to keep myself going in what I do for a little bit of sunshine. But, every day is a beautiful day. Every day is a day, that we make beautiful with our own attitudes, right? So it's all in how we're looking at things. These calls are just an amazing blessing to me on both sides of the line. I'm just so honored and privileged to be able to bring forth a message to you guys on these Thursdays, and I'm excited about the message today. But I just want to say what a great message was brought forth yesterday by Monique Washington. We all need to be reminded of the steps that we need to take in order to get massive action going. And I'm so grateful for that message yesterday for myself and for my business. So thank you, Monique, for that. I am forever amazed at how I can prepare a message without any idea of what's being brought forth, by the person before me. Usually it's going to be Omar. We don't talk about these things, and I'm just forever amazed at how often it's kind of an entree into what I'm going to bring out there for you, and so that's the case for today. If we want to take that massive action that Monique was talking about, it requires a lot of things. Obviously, we got some good steps yesterday, but one of the most important things in all of it really is our willingness to be uncomfortable. I reference the book, The Greatest Salesman in the World, often. And I have to tell you, if you haven't read it, you need to read it. And if you've read it already, you need to read it again. There's so many nuggets for you. And for your life, actually, not just for your business, but it will bless you beyond words. And as part of that, there are 10 scrolls. And I read them. The whole process is that you would read a scroll, for 30 days and 3 times a day, kind of embed that within your soul. So, you read it over and over and again. So I've just started the 5th scroll as I started the month of May. I kind of correlate that, with them. But there are lots of nuggets from the 4th scroll that are still going through my mind. See, that's the beauty of embedding it. And one line in that scroll that just resonates with me that you'll hear me say often because I've got it in my soul now. And that line is, I will strain my potential until it cries for mercy. Oh my goodness, I love that line. I'm sure that if you think about it, straining your potential, until you cry for mercy, you can think about a time in your life where you can think about when you dug deep, you were straining, you were pushing yourself. You can think about a time or a circumstance in your life where you were just crying for mercy. And just try to imagine that kind of passion and push, in your business. If we're all willing to strain our potential till it cries for mercy, we're going to see massive action. That's just going to be a part of the fruit that follows through, right? There's no way around it. It's going to follow. So we need to strain means that we need to be uncomfortable. You can't possibly think of that word strain and not think about being uncomfortable. It's a place where all the excuses just kind of go away. Pushing and pushing almost to that breaking point. We have to be willing to be uncomfortable. But are you willing to be uncomfortable? When you think about it, every single accomplishment that we make in life requires that we be uncomfortable. Every single thing. So what would be required to grow our business if everything else requires us being uncomfortable? And think about it. It starts at birth. You think about a baby, and oh my goodness, think about that baby being all red-faced and screaming out, just as loud as they can. They're uncomfortable, and the purpose in that is to expand their lungs, to grow them. You think about a toddler, and a toddler keeps standing up, falling down, standing up, falling down. They're uncomfortable. It doesn't feel good to crash and burn every 20 seconds, but they need to be uncomfortable to go to the next step. Or think about maybe the first day of school. There's not a kid on the planet, that is comfortable on that first day of school, but they need to get out the door, and they need to push and strain to be able to get their life to go to the point of, crying out for mercy. Think about your first date. Or going to prom or homecoming. Oh my goodness, just so worried about where am I going to look? Are they going to like me? Am I going to have fun? Am I going to be fun? All the things that go through your mind. You've got to be uncomfortable or you'd never go. Think about college. There's nothing comfortable about college. I mean, going away from home and finding your independence and having to build your own boundaries and staying up and cramming, and there's nothing comfortable about that. But you've got to be willing to be uncomfortable to be able to take that next step. Right, think about your first job interview. Can you remember that, for your first quote unquote real job, and your palms are all sweaty and you're sitting there trying to look your best and you're just hoping beyond hope that they choose you for that job. You were uncomfortable. Nobody would choose to go into these situations, willingly, unless it was a big goal at the end of the road. Tasks that were required of you in your first job. Maybe you had an office job, for instance. You were asked to do things that you'd never done before. You had to be willing to strain and get uncomfortable so that you could be good at your job. It goes on to our relationships, in our marriages or our significant others. We need to say things that aren't necessarily comfortable and do things that aren't necessarily comfortable. And we need to be willing to hear them and receive them as well. If we can't be uncomfortable in a relationship, if we aren't willing to be uncomfortable, there is no relationship. It's just all superficial. Think about having children. I'd be willing to bet that if you asked every single pregnant woman around the world if she's ready to be a mom, she'd probably answer with, I sure hope so. We're all excited about that baby, about that new birth, that new life. We can get real excited about that. But when we think about all that it's going to take to be a good mom or a good dad, we're scared to death. So whether or not we're prepared, if the baby's coming, and we got to be willing to step out and to strain out and to do and be uncomfortable in all the ways that matter so we can be a good parent. Every single thing significant in life requires that we be willing to be uncomfortable. So are you willing to be uncomfortable for your business? Nobody can make you willing to be uncomfortable. You have to be willing yourself. Sometimes I feel so sorry for people around me on my team at Crossline and, just people that when we gather together, because I realize after the fact that I'm kind of a, split personality. Sometimes I'm a, taskmaster and I'm just going boom, boom, boom with a checklist of things that need to be done. And the other side of me is like a Tony Robbins, just trying to rah-rah at people into action, But nothing I do, I could stand on my head, there's nothing I can do, and no matter how uncomfortable I get to try to inspire people, nothing I can say or do will force people into being willing to be uncomfortable. When you think about the steps that we need to take for our business, nobody loves to do them. Everybody's got to get uncomfortable. Some people might make it look like it's natural for them, but nobody likes doing these steps. Everybody's got to get uncomfortable. Nobody loves the idea of picking up the phone and calling somebody you've never talked to and potentially feeling rejection. Nobody likes that. But are you willing to be uncomfortable to get the job done? You're not alone. Anything that you tell yourself about these areas of your life or action that needs to be taken, you're not alone. Everybody's dealing with it. I'm a bold personality and I'm not shy. I have no problem, walking into a group and talking to people, and I'm just not shy. But every time I approach a stranger in an attempt to share with them what I have at the store or Starbucks or the airport or whatever, every single time I'm approaching them with that quote-unquote agenda, I'm uncomfortable. But I've got to be willing to do it if I were willing to grow. If you and I were receiving a six-figure paycheck from a company and they told us to jump, we'd be saying, how high you want me to jump? We wouldn't care how uncomfortable it was. We'd do whatever it took to keep that six-figure paycheck flowing in the door. It wouldn't matter. So if we're willing to do that, for our gain in a job, for a six-figure gain, if you will, what are we willing to do for our own business? And why aren't we willing to be uncomfortable in an arena or a business or a mission that really has no limitations financially? We could soar past a six-figure income if that's your desire, So why aren't we willing to be uncomfortable for it? I think sometimes we get kind of in a freedom mode, I call it, where maybe some people aren't used to working for themselves, and it feels good to not have to get up and out the door at a certain time of day, and it feels good to be able to pick and choose, kind of like a menu. What do you want to do today? But that's not reality, because when you work for yourself, you got to get uncomfortable, and you got to be willing to work harder for you than you would for that six-figure paycheck. But When we hear excuses for steps that people aren't taking to build, it always comes down to whether or not they're willing to be uncomfortable. I've heard it all personally, and well, maybe I haven't heard it all, but I've heard a lot. These calls would be a good example. I'm sure, they're Monday through Friday. I so appreciate the people that make the commitment to be on them. I have to confess, I'm not on every day. I'm on most days, but, not every morning. You guys are hitting this, in the first part of your day on the West Coast. It's not smooth sailing every morning. Come on. We know that there are distractions that might come forth. You might have things around the house, or you might have a sick child at home, or your spouse might need you to help with something, or you may not just feel up to par that day. Maybe you're just not feeling 100%. All kinds of things could get in the way of picking up the phone and getting on these calls. And these calls are usually 20 minutes long. So do we succumb to distractions, or are we willing to keep on going, straining until our potential till it cries for mercy? We all know the answer to that. Another good example is meetings at my house, for instance, every Monday night for a very long time. And I've heard so many people, I've heard it all, but I hear more often than not, it's too far, But you never hear those words from people who drive over an hour each way to get here. Those people are willing to be uncomfortable. And, when I talk about an hour's drive, I'm not talking about like LA traffic hour. I'm talking about it's probably 100 miles round trip on a Monday night. You think they aren't uncomfortable, but you never hear those words from them, because to them they see the value and they're willing to strain their potential until it cries for mercy. But others will say it's too dark, or it's raining, or it might rain, or it's cold, or it's hot, I'm tired, my dog is sick. You hear every excuse on the planet. These are people that aren't willing to be uncomfortable for what they're striving to achieve. The global convention is a prime example of this. Even though we hear over and over and over again about how our business will grow if we attend these events. And believe me, if you're still skeptical about that, I was too. I was new to this industry, and I would think, what in the world, But I've seen it firsthand. I felt it firsthand. And attending events like the global event that is fortunately in the U.S. for the second year, is so imperative to our growth, And yet more people in our business by far will not attend than those who will. More people are going to fall into the distractions and the excuses. The more people are not willing to be uncomfortable than those that are. Many people, most people will refuse to get uncomfortable. But rest assured, for those of us attending the global, it's not comfortable for any of us. All of us have schedules. All of us have families. Most of us have spouses or a significant other. We have children. We have a home to worry about, when we're gone, or pets. A lot of us have money issues. It's not that it's a piece of cake. As we talk about, you need to be at the event. It's not like we're saying, hey, it's a piece of cake. We know it means that you've got to get uncomfortable, but that's the key. And so even though we've known the date of the convention for almost a year in advance, almost a full year, guys, we had enough time to make the plans. We had enough time to save the money. But we refuse, most people refuse to get uncomfortable. I'm still hearing, we're, a little less than 90 days out, and I'm still hearing people say, well, I had planned to go and I bought my ticket, but I'm not going to be able to afford to go. Guys, that is such a ridiculous thing to say in our industry, because all it takes is to strain the potential till it cries for mercy, get a couple of sales you weren't expecting, you got the money to go to global. But it's too easy to go back to the comfort zone. Don't you think it's odd that we expect people to dig deep and to find the money to purchase a device? And when they don't, we criticize them. We say, what's their problem? That they wouldn't dig deep. Don't they understand the value of this? And yet we won't dig deep to make convention work. That's got to be something that would make you go, how can we possibly judge that and say things about sacrifices that people aren't willing to make when we make comments about people that won't strain until they can get outside their comfort zone and buy into our technology, and yet we're not willing to do the same thing. I've heard heart-wrenching stories of how people have sold prized possessions to buy our devices. I've heard stories about people selling, a vehicle to get the money to buy a device because they saw the value, and yet we would never consider sacrificing like that to attend the very thing that will propel us to success. People that want to do, people that see the value will get outside the comfort zone. Every single leader in our business that we hear from, that the big leaders in our business can shed some light on how they had to be uncomfortable to grow to where they are today. It didn't just happen. They didn't get lucky. God didn't just smile on them a little more than he's smiling on you and me. They were willing to get uncomfortable. It's a necessary and non-negotiable piece of success. If we look at Romy, God love him, Romy has the biggest heart. I love him. He's such an amazing leader, Romy and Rose. And, Romy, if you haven't heard his story, he didn't roll out of bed and just hit the lottery in this business. He worked hard. He got outside of his comfort zone, But Romy was at a place in his life where, he had been in real estate. The market crashed, and Rose was a nurse in the hospital closed. They were not in a good place, folks. They were uncomfortable. And when he was introduced to this business, he said, forget being, you think it wouldn't be easier for him to say, I don't have the money to go here and there. I don't have the energy to go here and there. He got outside of his comfort zone and he strained his potential until it cried for mercy. And that's why he has the success he has today. To me is another one. I love her. She's a sister to me. I just love her spirit and her soul. If we weren't in this business, I'd still feel connected with Tamia. But when you hear her story, she talks about how she would take her kids, to demos, and two kids would sit in the car for a couple of hours while she's inside doing a demo. You think that her mother's heart was comfortable with that? I mean, I'm not talking about little kids. I don't want to make it sound like she had toddlers in the car. But do you think a mother is comfortable? Don't you think as she was doing a demo, she wasn't having some thoughts of, I hope they're okay, I hope it's not hot, I hope it's not cold, I hope they're not fighting, I hope the doors are locked. You think she wasn't uncomfortable? Or she talks about how she had this heap of a car. God bless her. She just put it out on Facebook. It was a beautiful testimony of her growth in life. But, she had this car, and she tells a story about how the seats were ripped. It's probably vinyl, and she would, slide out of the car and cut her legs all up. You think that was comfortable for her? But she was willing to strain her potential until it cried for mercy. And that's why she is where she is today. So the question of the day is, are we willing to be uncomfortable? Are we willing to strain our potential, or are we just going to continue to talk about being successful? Don't you really want to talk the talk and walk the walk? But you know what? No matter what we do, no matter what message we bring forth, it always comes down to the why. The why is what will give you that purpose. Like Romy, with his family, didn't want to go into foreclosure for the second time in his life. He was willing to do whatever to save it. And Tamia, she wanted better things for her children. She was willing to sit them in the car and scrape her legs all up, But the question is, are we willing to do that? If you think about these leaders and you think about how uncomfortable they had to be, you have to understand that there had to be a big why behind it. And so it always goes down to what's driving us. Maybe you're in a place in life where you don't need an extra income. Maybe you've got a paycheck at home and you really don't need to worry about that. This is a great kind of part-time thing in your mind, or you just don't have the push, the drive financially. That's not it for me. I often talk to people that I know have a paycheck at home, and I know sometimes I see the lack of strain, if you will, because of it, because they're comfortable. But when you get uncomfortable and when you consider some kind of why that you could have in your soul that you can't obtain unless you're willing to strain your potential until it cries for mercy, that's when you'll see success. So I hope that this message, makes you ponder some things in your life. Everything you've ever accomplished, from breathing the first breaths of life when a baby's crying out to expand their lungs, to going off to your first job, you go to being married, to raising your kids. Every single accomplishment you've ever had in your life required that you be uncomfortable. So why not this? So I would ask that you dig deep, look at your why. Reevaluate where you are. You've got, again, it's just shy of 90 days for the global convention. Stop making those excuses. Be willing to be uncomfortable. Get creative. Think about how you can come up with the money if you don't have the money. There's plenty of time for you to crank down and get extra sales. Or if your work, maybe you can work some extra hours at your job. Maybe there's something in your home that you could sell, and I'm not joking when I say that. Are you willing to be uncomfortable? Because I can tell you, unless we're willing to be uncomfortable, we'll never see the success. So my hope and prayer for you is that you'll dig deep, reevaluate that why, and that you'll be willing to strain your potential until it cries for mercy, because that's what I'll be doing all the way from Virginia. So on that note, I want to again tell you to keep your eye on the why. Be encouraged today. Keep straining, keep pushing, keep crying out for mercy. I'll see you guys at the top. I hope I see you at Global, and I'll definitely see you next Thursday. Make it a great day. Bye-bye, guys.